It's Saturday AM Live with Dr. Josie. I am Dr. Josie Beug. I am an integrative holistic vet who I've had a holistic house call practice for 25 years in South Florida. I still am seeing house call patients in the Miami, Broward County area, and I am doing online consults, second opinion consults. If you want help with diet, help with nutrition, help with herbal therapy, I also do those. And I have a wonderful online community that we met last night, and we had an awesome class on moxibustion, learning how to do moxibustion for ourselves to keep the caregivers healthy, and learning how to do it on our pets. So, moxibustion, in case you don't know, it's a Chinese therapy. It's actually the burning of herbs over the body on acupuncture points. And so I had a really relaxing sleep last night and had really good dreams. And I've got my cup of tea. So I thought this would be a little bit of a relaxing live session today. What triggered me to do this is a video talk, whatever you want to call it, that I've been wanting to do for a long time. What triggered me to do it is I got in the mail, one of Human Herbalist was thinning out their book collection, and I found this. It's Milk's Veterinary Pharmacology, Materia Medica, and Therapeutics, the sixth edition, that was published in 1949 by Howard J. Milks, DVM, Professor Emeritus, formerly Professor of Therapeutics and Director of the Small Animal Clinic, New York State University College at Cornell, Ithaca, New York, with a chapter on biological diagnosis, prophylaxis, and therapy. So I think it's really important for us to know our history, whether it's history of politics, history of geology, history of the place we live, or history of medicine. Because we tend, as modern man with our human egos, we tend to think that we are at the pinnacle of development and that we know everything and that we're coming up with all these fancy new um, ways of treating things. One of them being like mRNA, the mRNA technology, monoclonal antibodies. Okay. And we kind of poo-poo other things that may seem kind of weird, like the medical establishment is pretty down on herbs or supplements, vitamins, things like that. So it's really interesting to see how were they treating cases. 1949, that was less than 100 years ago, about 70 years ago. And I have another big book here, which this is, if anybody knows if it's possible to restore ancient books, please drop me a line and message me, because I want to try to preserve this so that it doesn't continue falling apart. This is a United States dispensatory. Um, and I'm going to set it down because I don't want to put any stress on it. It is the 17th edition. As a preface to the first edition. And let me see. I can find the big long glossary. Okay, I cannot find the title page. It's not stuck. Okay, here it is. The Dispensatory of the United States. The United States Dispensatory may very well properly be considered as a commentary upon the United States and British pharmacopoeias. Well, such preparations of the German pharmacopoeia and French codex as are used generally in the United States are also commented upon. As was explained in the 15th edition, the changes in the arrangement of the 1880 edition necessitated blah, blah, blah. This was 1835. So we have 2 different re 2 different eras of medicine here. The 1949 one was very interesting because, in the United States, if people don't know, there were homeopathic colleges, and there was a large, very different herbal schools. One of a big one that was in the United States were called the eclectics. There was also anthroposophical medicine from Germany. In the 1920s, the homeopathic colleges in the United States were shut down by big business, by the Rockefellers and JP Morgans, literally, of the world. Right now, we would say it's the BlackRocks, but they literally shut the colleges down, and it was right around the beginning of when they developed Bayer aspirin. And so what's fascinating about this 1949 book, it's published after World War II, and they developed the first antibiotic, penicillin, in World War II. And it was a miracle drug because when you're dealing with men with severe battle wounds and getting their legs blown off and gunshot wounds and bomb fragments and shrapnel and everything else, you want to have an antibiotic on hand. And that was one of the reasons why so many people suffered and died so severely in the Civil War because they did not have any antibiotics. So they did have penicillin. It was after they closed down the homeopathic colleges. But there's some things that are really fascinating to me that show up in this book. Now, this book, I also got, just before we get going, I got I kind of collect antique medicine boxes, and these are fascinating too because there's something I can hold in my hand and show you. This is a company, maybe it's a brand called Pure Test Senna leaves. Senna is a very common treatment for constipation, and it still is. I won't even recommend Senna tea for my patients. It was packed by United Drug Company, Boston, St. Louis, USA. It's 1 ounce of India senna. Yellowish green leaflets having a mucilaginous and bitter taste, medicinal use. As a tea made by steeping in a pint of hot water, it is considered a prompt and safe cathartic. This effect can be increased by adding Pure Test Epsom salt to the tea. And then it gives directions. So we have an herbal medication from United Drug Company. I don't have the dates on these. I wish they didn't really have expiration dates on them. This one is by Pure Test as well, and it's tansy. And right now we're seeing a lot of blue tansy, especially in a lot of cosmetics and a lot of creams. So this is blue tansy, again, packed by the United Drug Company out of Boston and St. Louis. We guarantee the Pure Test line of botanical drugs to meet the highest requirements of the government standard, the Rexall store. So they made Epsom salt, sodium phosphate, milk sugar, boric acid. Tansy. Tansy is apt to lose some of its volatile constituents through evaporation. The leaves and tops possess a highly aromatic, fragrant, and strong odor and a warm, aromatic, and somewhat bitter taste. Medicinal use, carminative and antihelmintic. It's a dewormer. The hot tea is recommended to promote perspiration and as a quieting agent in hysteria. As a tea, sip 1 ounce in a pint of water. Then we have ancient, ancient lavender flowers, which started falling out of this box. This is the initial line, loose pressed lavender flowers. Select Lavandula officinalis, 1 ounce, SB Pennick and Company, Crude Drugs, New York, New York, the initial source of supply. So this was maybe lavender flowers. And then they give the synonym, the part used, the flowers, the family, the habitat grown in Europe, and a control number on there. Okay? So these were early medications. This is what we found in Rexall drugstore. SW Gold and Brothers, poplar bark, Populus alba, Botanic Garden, Malden, Massachusetts. And that's all that's on there, but there's still dried herb in there. And then this last one I have over here is wild yam root, Dioscorea villosa, and it just says wholesale botanic druggist out of Boston. So I think we need to realize that herbal medicine isn't some weird woo-woo thing that only like hippies use or something. It was our medicine. And in this book, I was going to see the very first herb, the very first in the 1835. There's acacia, and then right before acacia, the very first entry into the 1835 pharmacopoeia or dispensatory is absinthium. So wormwood, the leaves and tops of Artemisia absinthium. Um, and and this what's really cool about this big old book, I'm not gonna get it out right now, it has a 20-page commentary written by a doctor who made a tincture of cannabis and then described in detail what that tincture of cannabis did to him, what his experience of was it. Um, and let me see. It's it's really, really fascinating because, it must have been a really, really strong tincture because it literally describes how it made his legs numb and his toes tingling, and it sent him off into, like, la la land. So if you ever get a chance to look through one of these, it's really, really cool. Now, this veterinary one, I actually went through and I bookmarked some pages here that I thought were really interesting. First of all, um, it's listed in chapters, and they have the introduction, source and composition of drugs. Gross under the in the introductory section, it has definitions, source and composition of drugs, gross anatomy of plants, and chemistry of plants. So we have under gross anatomy, so they're actually putting botany and herbalism in this 1949 book of Materia Medica for veterinary medicine. So they talk about the underground portions. These include the root, rhizome, tuber, bulb, and corm. The root is that portion usually without chlorophyll and which does not have power to produce leaves. Um, then we have the portions above ground. If the entire plant above ground is used, it is termed herb and consists of the leaves, stems, and sometimes of the flower and fruit. The stem. In herby plants, it is termed stipes. In larger plants, it is transformed into wood, lignum, and covered with a bark, cortex. The leaves consist of a leaf, stem, and blade. There are also flowers and fruit or seed. Besides the above, certain drugs consist of the juices of plants and are without definite structure. In parentheses, opium and aloes. And then the second section is going into the chemistry of plants. So they list alkaloids, characteristics of alkaloids, nomenclature, um, what alkaloids are incompatible with. Then they have glycosides, neutral or bitter principles, resins, gums, balsams, resinoids, fats and oils, volatile oils, which are what we essentially are causing essential oils right now, waxes, saponins, and sapotoxins. Enzymes or ferments are substances which are able to cause chemical change without entering into the reaction or end product. Hormones and vitamins. So, and then they go into pharmacy and then dispensing. Pharmacy proper, they include liquid preparations as aqueous, waters, alcoholics, spirits, simple solutions. What was really interesting here? Glycerins, elixirs, um, tinctures, infusions and decoctions. These are all things that we use in herbal medicine. So our infusions are generally like teas, like what I infused some herbs in my teacup this morning. Decoctions are where you take herbs and you cook them for a really, really, really long time. Um, and cook them down to where it's really thick. And then you have alcoholic tinctures and fluid extracts. And then they have what they're called ethereals, oleoresins, which I'm not quite sure what those are. And then liniments and solid preparations. So they talk about like using waters, which are essentially hydrosols is what we're calling them now. So hydrosols are where you take plant material and you still distill off the water of it. So they have distilled water, orange flower water. Now, mind you, this is all veterinary medicine. Orange flower water, stronger rose water, water for injection, witch hazel water, anise water, bitter almond water, camphor water, cinnamon water, fennel water, chloroform water. I skipped that one. Peppermint water, spearmint water, rose water, and wintergreen water. So those are all hydrosols um, made through a still. And when I was on my trip to Ireland, it was really cool. We made a rosemary hydrosol. One of the leaders of the trip had a copper still there, and herbalists can buy them. I'm really thinking of getting one. And then you put your plant material into it and distill off the distilled water. They also have simple solutions, mucilages, syrups, honeys, which is what we would call um, oxymels, emulsions, milks, elixirs, all different kinds, those preparations. So this was still when people were making like tinctures. Let me see. These were still when people were making enough herbalism escaped the shutdown of homeopathic schools and got into this book in 1949. Now I looked up homeopathy in the index, and the one entry that they had, I bookmarked here, it's on 47. It talks about the history of this is the history of herbs, of therapeutics, history of therapeutics. Okay. And it's actually really fascinating. It goes all the way. Therapeutics probably dates back to prehistoric time when man cared for his own ills and those of his family and animals. He no doubt chose his remedies from the surrounding vegetation much in the same way as his food. That is, he tried many things in the hope that some would be of benefit. The Bible contains many references to medicine, and the laws of Moses may be regarded in the light of the first meat inspection law. Many of our remedies can be traced to early periods of civilization, and he goes back to 2250 BC in Babylonia, in Egypt. He talks a lot about the Babylonians, actually, a whole couple paragraphs. And then he says, in the early days of medicine, the priests were the physicians and ministered to both body and soul. Their remedies and practices were closely associated with religion and mysticism. They obtained their knowledge from others, from records in the temples, and from experience. Um, After a while, the practice of medicine became too large for the priests to look after, so a new class arose who looked after the bodily ills and gave the priests full power to look after the spiritual welfare of man. Hippocrates was one of these first physicians and is said to be the father of medicine. He gained much of his knowledge from the records in the temples, was a close observer and voluminous writer. He believed in the theory of the four cardinal humors: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and mucus or phlegm, and of coction and crisis. By coction was meant a thickening or elaboration of the humors of the body, which was sometimes necessary for their elimination. Um, Crisis was yeah, so it actually he goes a little bit in depth into the Hippocrates Greek medicine and using the four humors. Now, the four humors of Greek medicine was a little bit similar to the five elements of TCM. All of those were happening at the same time, and then you also had Ayurveda in India with the three doshas. What's fascinating is that Tibetan medicine arose because it was a crossroads between China to the east. You had China on this side, you had Hippocrates and Greek on this side with Alexander the Great coming through to the east. And then in the south, you had India and Ayurvedic. And Tibetan medicine is literally at the crossroads and contains elements of all of those medicines. Um, What else does he say? Remedies were chosen solely by their recommendation and reputation. Let's see. Then he goes on to talk about the theory of signatures, which is the doctrine of signatures, which the eclectic school of herbalism used a lot. Some herbalists hate it. I really find it fascinating because I find it a way to look at the plant and kind of recognize what the plant is used for. And it's just too coincidental and too many times to not have some validity to it. So here, 1949 veterinary, the theory of signatures was responsible for many curious drugs. It was thought that the creator, in providing for relief, marked the plants in some way to point out their use. Many were employed just because they resembled some part of the body in shape or color. Bloodroot was used for the flux, hepatica and saffron for diseases of the liver, and lungwort for pulmonary affections. Numerous organs of animals were also employed. Fox lungs for respiratory disorders, human skulls for epilepsy, brain for mental diseases, urine salts to dissolve urinary calculi, etc. So this was the beginning of what we call glandular therapy, where you use the gland to treat the gland. So if you have a thyroid problem, you take dried thyroid. Now, in this book in 1949, we still find that information. There's dried extracts of pituitary gland. There's dried extracts of thyroid and thymus written in here. He goes on to talk about the alchemists or the chemists. While searching for something that would turn all metals into gold and cure all diseases, they proposed a number of remedies. They made extensive trials upon the well and sick, and it is said that antimony was so named from its disastrous effects upon the brother monks of the discoverer. Shotgun prescriptions were soon in vogue. They contained a great number of remedies and were given in the hopes that some of them would benefit the patient. Now, these are actually the ones that I love to hate is like the jar of supplements where you have got 20 different things in there and you're going to give one little quarter teaspoon. And how much of each one of those 20 things is the animal even getting? So he's calling this 1949 veterinary pharmacology shotgun remedies. If If the patient survived, credit was given the medicine for a cure. If he died, it was attributed to the severity of the disease. Those usages led to a state of nihilism from which Hahnemann, which is the developer of homeopathy, from which Hahnemann developed the system of homeopathy and the rule similibus curantur, like cures like. Symptoms alone were treated, and little, if any, attention was given to the disease itself. Hahnemann also believed that by trituration and dilution or shaking, medicine could be made more powerful for good effect. While there were many fallacies in this method, it proved of service to rational medicine because it demonstrated that disease tends to recover without the intervention of drugs. One of the next steps in therapeutics was that of total freedom from drugs, which dates back to 1745. Skoda, Skoda, who lived from 1805 to 1881, was one of its strongest advocates, was the founder of the methods of auscultation and percussion, and really benefited the science which he sought to destroy. So it's very interesting. So they're talking about Hahnemann making those dilutions and succussing the homeopathic remedies, but where it actually proved that disease could recover without the intervention of drugs. But they don't say, I guess he's saying that the homeopathics didn't have any drug issues with it, but yeah, it's very interesting to look at the thought and the reasoning and what they were still thinking about in 1949. I mean, it goes back to Babylon and Egypt. Methods of treatment. And then we have those. So I was going to go on and just look up some of the different things you find in this book, which again are fascinating. So we have like under stimulus to this, okay, we have Nux vomica is in here. What's interesting is a lot of the remedies that are used in homeopathy are in this book, but I don't know if they're homeopathic dilutions. Now, Nux vomica tincture, they have Nux vomica, which is a really common homeopathic used for vomiting. Synonyms, dog button, Quaker button, poison nut. It does have strychnine in it, and they have these, like, 7 to 7.5% strychnine extracts, tinctures. They're very, very low doses, like dogs, 0.00032, so they're probably almost homeopathic doses. It's listed for the digestive system as an excellent stomach tonic and acting as a bitter. So even though he dissed Hahnemann, there's still some of the homeopathic formulas in here, but they're not quite homeopathic. They actually look like they have some actual substance in them. Then there's hydrastis, which is golden seal. The dried roots and rhizomes of Hydrastis canadensis yielding constituents, preparations, doses for the nervous system. It's a stimulant to mucous membranes. Digestive system, it has the action of a bitter upon the appetite. In ordinary doses, the respiratory system is stimulated. And it's used as bitter stomachic excitomotor for the spinal cord. But they don't really talk about it in terms of antibacterial, which is interesting. Yeah, they don't have any mention of antibacterial. Feeble oxytoxic. Okay, so then we go on to drugs depressing the peripheral nervous system. They have belladonna and the atropine group. So belladonna is a deadly nitrate. It is also a very common homeopathic remedy. But again, here they have it as a leaf extract, very, very low dose, diluted down. Atropine lessens sensation and pain, does not produce anesthesia. Very, very interesting. Then we go into, they have cocaine in here because that was one of the local anesthetics. Tobacco, what they had available is very fascinating. They also go into the vitamins. So vitamin preparations, cod liver oil is a big one for vitamins A and D. They talk about each vitamin separately. They talk about carotenes. They probably talk about the vitamins and minerals more than we do in modern veterinary medicine. So we have pancreatin, which is usually obtained from the fresh pancreas of the hog or ox. It contains the specific ferments of the pancreas and represents its external secretion. But there's no evidence that it represents its internal secretion, and it has no power to check pancreatic diabetes. So he's I guess the external secretion are the pancreatic enzymes, the internal secretion is the insulin. Um, in regard to its protein and starch digesting power, it's so they're using dried pancreas for its digestive enzyme. Vitamin A, carotene, vitamin D, cod liver oil, halibut oil, thiamine, riboflavin, all the B vitamins it goes into, choline, biotin, vitamin B12. They talk about histamines and antihistamines, um, aloes, and using them as laxatives. He does have a section, there's a big section because it is veterinary medicine on vermicides and dewormers, and there is a section on heartworms, Dirofilaria immitis. Two drugs have been recommended for the treatment against these parasites, Fluadin and Filsol. Both are antimony compounds. Um, And I forgot exactly what antimony. Filsol, this is a solution of a double salt of antimony said to be compatible with normal blood. It is easily contaminated by molds and fungi and may become toxic if left exposed. Must be administered intravenously and may cause sloughing if it gets outside the vein. So it gives doses of those. Pinworms, whipworms, um, lungworms, difilaria of sheep, treatment of roundworms, coccidia and tinea. So they're using the sulfa drugs by this time for a lot of these. And olive oil, creosote oil. Now they're starting to experiment more with some chemical things in here, which kind of is freaky. So he has a whole chapter on the volatile oil group, essential oils. So we have external and local actions of them, central nervous system actions, blood, digestive system. So volatile oils used for flavors and carminatives, malodorous volatile oils. So he goes through anise oil, bitter almond oil, bitter orange oil, clove oil, cinnamon oil, eucalyptus oil, fennel, ginger, lemon, peppermint, rose, rosemary, sassafras, spearmint, sweet birch, thyme, wintergreen, um, mustard oils as skin irritants, turpentine, lavender, rosemary, pine needle oil, tansy oil, volatile oils used in dentistry. The most important are cloves, cinnamon, sassafras, and wintergreen. Volatile oils used as insecticides. So we were using essential oil sprays for insecticides, you guys. It's not something new. Certain volatile oils or drugs containing them are used to kill and repel certain insects, such as mosquitoes, flies, etc. Most important are insect powder, Persian insect powder, the powdered flowers of pyrethrin species, and Dalmatian powder, the powdered flowers of Chrysanthemum folium, eucalyptus, menthol, cedar, lavender, hellebore, anise, and citronella. Um, useful formula for repelling flies and mosquitoes is oil of eucalyptus 10, oil of citronella 10, camphorated oil 30, and then liquid petrolatum at 50. So the petroleum companies are coming in. So we're taking the essential oils and adding in petroleum oil. We have drugs affecting the respiratory system. Volatile oils used in cystitis. So we've got like cedar leaf oil, Herba ursi is listed as a diuretic stimulant to the genitourinary tract and the urine. Let's see, arnica, which arnica flowers is a homeopathic. Um, perennial of temperate regions of Europe, Asia, and America. They have arnica tincture, arnica fluid extract. Small doses taken internally slow the heart and raise the blood pressure. Toxic doses cause a feeble pulse, severe gastrointestinal disturbances, prostration, and delirium or stupor. So that's why they used it in a homeopathic dose. Although, as I say, the homeopathic colleges were closed. Then we have like things like dried thyroid glands, desiccated thyroid glands. So this was the beginning, they were using glandulars. This is the dried thyroid gland of animals, which are used for food by man, freed from connective tissue and fat, and containing not less than 0.17 nor more than 0.23% of iodine. Doses in grams for dogs, 0.003 to 0.25. The thyroids of most animals contain iodine. And then he talks about the effects of the removals of the thyroid, the action on metabolism. And then what else do we have? Oh, and there's just so much in here, and I bookmarked just the highlights. Stibnite. Ooh. So its antimony is in a stone. How interesting is that? So silver, this was the other thing. They use the salts of the heavy metals. Arsenic, antimony, and phosphorus. So they use, of course, iron, talking about ferrum, iron supplements, ferric salts. Like a lot of this chemistry, a lot of this came out of the alchemists, which he talked about, zinc. And then he has a whole section on silver. Silver, plain silver argentum, silver nitrate, um, and colloidal silver preparations. So he says many attempts have been made to produce a compound of silver that will retain its desirable qualities without the undesirable ones of silver nitrate. The compounds are all mixtures of metallic silver, silver oxide, and silver protein compounds in various proportions. All are in colloidal form and are miscible in water, forming black or brown suspensions of the minutely insoluble particles. Um, they are not astringent, not irritant, or mildly so, and are much less powerful germicides than silver nitrate. It is generally believed that any antiseptic action is due to the liberation of silver ions. They stain linen or clothing a dark brown. The stains may be removed by a 1 to 1,000 mercuric chloride solution. There are a comparatively large number of these preparations. The most important have been grouped in new and non-official remedies as strong silver protein type, mild silver protein type, blah, blah, blah. So what do they use them for? Electric type, silver haloids. It is possible to make colloidal solutions of metallic silver by forming an arc between two silver electrodes underwater. These solutions are not stable enough for concentration and are very dilute. And then we have Lunasol. And that was a silver oxide. Then we have bismuth, which Pepto-Bismol comes out of. Lead, distribution of lead in the body, toxic doses. There's a mercury, because they used to use mercury in medicine. It said mercury differs from the other metals in having a marked specific toxic action upon protoplasm. So now what is protoplasm? Mercury nephritis, salts of mercury. There's like 10 pages on mercury. And so those are the heavy metals. And we go into a huge section on sulfur compounds because they were using those like antibiotics. And what's really interesting, coming out of World War II, the last one of the last chapters in the book chapter 29 is antibiotics with penicillin listed because penicillin, it was a really big deal, you guys, in World War II. It probably did save a lot of people. So they talk about um, wow. So penicillin is the best therapeutic agent for the treatment of all staphylococcus infections with or without bacteremia. So acute and chronic osteomyelitis, carbuncles, soft tissue abscess, pneumonia, wounds and burns infections, all clostridial infections, gas gangrene, malignant edema. Now this is clostridial tetanus and botulinum. So to find something that would cure tetanus and to cure botulism was a big deal. Um, all hemolytic streptococci infections with bacteremia or serious local infection, cellulitis, pneumonia, and empyema, peritonitis, all anaerobic streptococci infections, all cases of anthrax. Anthrax was a serious problem as well. My dad grew up on a cattle ranch in the 1930s, and he said the actual government came through and killed off their entire cattle herd because there was an anthrax outbreak and anthrax would kill you. So they're using penicillin to treat anthrax. So you have to kind of understand when this came out, it was such a miracle drug that, but then they became laser focused on just producing, well, we'll just keep finding new antibiotics and that's going to be the cure all. It's kind of like even now we get on this tunnel vision. So there are some other antibiotics in here. Penicillin is followed by streptomycin and streptomycin, streptothricin, and bacitracin. And then we also have chloramycetin, which is probably right before chloramphenicol, clavicin, which was probably a precursor for clavulinic acid, which they combined with penicillin into what we now know as Clavamox. Um, so that's just really interesting. Then there's a small chapter on what's called protective and emollients that are to cover the skin. So they have lard, suet, wool fat, olive oil, glycerin, um, demulcents, acacia. Then we go into miscellaneous. So in the miscellaneous section, there's insulin, liver. Liver has its own this is why. And now what do we see? Like in the carnivore diet, all these people, everybody's going back to eating liver. My mom used to love liver and onions. I cannot eat liver. I have to take freeze-dried capsules. But liver is its own little section in this book, Materia Medica. Says liver is official as the extract, a brownish powder, as liver injection and liver from stomach. The liver preparations all contain the soluble thermostable fraction of mammalian liver necessary for the maturation of the red corpuscles in the blood of people affected with pernicious anemia. The approximate potency is expressed in USP units. Actions and uses. Liver contains a maturing factor for erythrocytes, red blood cells, in pernicious anemia, in which condition the factor is lacking. It is also known as the anti-anemia factor. This factor is not effective in iron anemia, but is said to be effective in restoring the number of red cells after hemorrhage. Intramuscular injections are about 30 times as effective as oral doses in pernicious anemia. Liver contains the vitamins thiamine, riboflavin, nicotinic acid, peroxidine, pantothenic acid. Right. So then we have dextrose, D-glucose for injection. Saccharin is in here, which is interesting. Urea, um, and then a couple other things. And then there's a whole section in the back on biological diagnosis, prophylaxis, and therapy. And so it is actually about the immune system. The whole first section talks about immunity principles and practices, diagnosis, clinical immunity, the normal defense mechanism of the body, surface membranes, phagocytosis, antibody formation. They were talking about back then the dual role of the reticuloendothelial system, prophylactic immunization. So we have active immunity, methods of altering virulence, um, purification and concentration of antigens. So making the first vaccines, adjuvants added to active immunizing agents. When they first started adding adjuvants, um, mass immunization, mass vaccination, and brucellosis control. Brucella was actually another really severe disease, and it could kill people. So that was another thing in cattle. And then they have, following brucellosis, they have max vaccination in rabies control. Tissue blocking. They talk about the amnestic reaction, the booster shot. All right, this is very interesting. So 1949, maybe I should send this section. Scientists today need to read this section. So it says, once the tissues of the body have learned how to produce antibody for a particular antigen, they never forget. A second injection of vaccine or reinfection with the disease produces agent causes a response which is different from the first. Antibody production following such re-exposure occurs very promptly. It begins within a matter of hours instead of days. In addition to being more prompt, the response is also more apt to be more copious. This phenomena is a basis for the quote unquote booster shot, so frequently employed in maintaining a high state of resistance. It may be employed with any vaccination procedure. Wow. Um, wow. And then they go more in depth to this, which I want to sit down and read this whole entire section. They talk about hypersensitivity. Um, The immune mechanism has been described above as a protective device. Under certain circumstances, the same mechanism may be harmful. This may seem like a strange paradox, but let us consider how it is brought about. When antibodies are produced, they are attached to the cells which produce them. Let me see. Okay, if their production still continues, a sufficient amount of antibody may be formed so that not only are all of the tissues saturated, but there is free antibody in the circulating fluids. If the stimulus to antibody formation now ceases, it gradually disappears, but it may still be attached to tissue cells. This is the ideal condition for the creation of a state of hypersensitivity. It should be pointed out here that there are two times when this state of affairs exists. One is on the upgrade before antibody appears free in circulation. The other is on the downgrade when that antibody which has been circulating unattached to cells disappear. Um, and then it talks about and then he goes into tuberculosis, tuberculin, the tuberculin test, hypersensitivity, and pathogenesis. Um, where it can actually create tissue damage may be result. Allergy in animals, the diagnosis of allergy of animals, the treatment of allergy in animals, passive immunity. So there's a pretty good, this is probably like an early immunology session. There's serological reactions. And then he talks about biologics. And in 1949, the biologics they had available were, let's see, anthrax vaccine, blackleg vaccine, avian bronchitis virus, brucellosis, canine distemper, the From vaccine for canine distemper, a feline distemper vaccine, equine encephalomyelitis, pasteurrosis, hemorrhagic septicemia, hog cholera, laryngotracheitis. That's interesting. It talks about that in birds, though, and Newcastle disease in birds, and then the poxes in birds, rabies vaccine, and swine and tetanus. So there was no parvo vaccine, there was no lepto vaccine, none of that was available back in those days. So anyways, I may if you again, what I would say if you guys get any chance to just flip through these books, it just shows in some ways how we've come a long ways in medicine, but at the same time, I think we've forgotten certain things and left certain things behind, like essential oils, all the vitamin therapy in here, which now we're going back to giving vitamin D. But for a long time, because we were so fixated on the antibiotic issue, all the vitamins kind of fell by the wayside. This book, this other big book, is something that I will dig into at some point. Um, this is like an ancient herbal book. It's really, really interesting. And again, if anybody has any ideas on how to preserve these old books like that, please let me know. And have a great rest of your weekend. Um, Next week, I will be on talking about something else, but I just thought we would take a jaunt through the history of medicine and see maybe what we were missing, what was forgotten, was forgotten is circling back around for our use and our animals. And it's always good to keep an open mind about things, you know? As to what's good and what's not good. No, there's a lot in the news right now coming out about the whole Tylenol escapade and vaccines. So we just need to keep an open mind. I would, I'll have to look. I don't even think there's aspirin in here. That was from willow bark. And I think the aspirin is in this big book, but maybe I'll put up some information about that. Take care. Have a good Saturday, everybody, and join me next week and share, comment. If you have any questions, you can always put that up. And if you need any help with your animals, just contact me, either direct message me here or on Facebook Messenger. Thanks so much. Take care.